Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our show, Lifestyle with Dr. Mobi. I'm Dr. Mobi. Today we have an excellent guest, and her name is Heather. Um, and she is going to talk about a unique thing, which is with today's episode, will be covering space. And it is wide open for everyone actually to explore and come up with the new ideas on its territorial range and so forth. So it's going to open up new chapter in the history of mankind as US has space force, and now we're going to discuss that what are the implications of those in terms of territorial range and bylaws and laws whatever we can have between different countries. So we have great guest, and I will have her introduce her self. Go ahead, Heather.
Sure. Thank you so much, first of all, Dr. Mobi, for having me on the show. It's a great honor. So I'm an academic of law. I started out in constitutional law and human rights law. I completed my doctorate a few years ago, and now I'm a faculty member in a law faculty up in Iceland. And so I didn't originally come to law through space law, but as I kind of looked more and more at the kind of big issues of our time and the kind of emerging themes of this era, I just became more and more fascinated by how we would use law and adapt law and the mechanisms that we also have from law in the 20th century to this new era of space, because we are clearly entering a new era of space exploration. It's a kind of unprecedented period in the last few years since sort of the Cold War era in terms of space exploration from national space agencies and also space exploration, and this is entirely new and really fascinating, space exploration from companies that are not national space institutions. So Elon Musk is getting a lot of attention for his initiatives with space exploration and plans to explore Mars. And so I've been thinking a lot about how we can use the tools that we already have to ensure that this new era of space exploration ensures a space for everyone, right? And ensures that this can be to the benefit of humanity as a whole. Because I really believe that space exploration is for the benefit of humanity as a whole and is an extension of caring about Earth. But we need to make sure that we have the tools and the mechanisms in place in law to ensure that it's for the benefit of everyone, not just a few companies mining or for a few telecommunications organizations. So how to make space equitable is what I'm interested in.
Okay, great. Also, I think I've seen, the big concern is about, those satellites and things in the orbit, and that is going to constitute space debris for a lot of nations.
Yes, yeah, it's already a huge issue, and the law of that is very interesting, and what duties and responsibilities we'll have in order to deal with this. And also the concept of being a good ancestor, I think, is very important here. That's a concept from sustainability and the environment, that you must treat the place in such a way that future generations can also enjoy it. And if if the Earth becomes kind of surrounded by this thick, dense layer of space junk, what heritage are we leaving for future generations? It will begin to impede space exploration and begin to impede people in all sorts of ways. So that's a very important question.
And do you think they will contribute to those who's going to clean, and whoever does that, is there any fund they have that, or how they're going to deal with that? I mean, it's like ocean pollution, right?
It's much like ocean pollution. It's very interesting, and there could be potentials for civil litigation in terms of companies, organizations, but also that it is incumbent upon every national space agency for anything that they put there, that they are responsible for it. So there are already kind of tools and mechanisms in place in law for that. But I think there really needs to be more and more cooperation. The problem with space law is very interesting because in a way it expands out from maritime law. law, right? Which is one of the earliest types of law. Like we're trading with each other, we're from different countries. How do we navigate this fairly? And then aviation law kind of built upon that. And space law has kind of moved further. But these in some ways are very old paradigms from old ways of being. And now we're in this very hyper-connected, multilateral world. We need to like rework our ways of cooperating. There is the ISS agreement from 1998, and there's other kind of mechanisms in place to coordinate initiatives between different national space agencies and also between different private companies. But I think that we really need more and more cooperation in space in order to ensure that it's for the benefit of everyone. One of the tragedies of the last great period of space exploration is that it was this wonderful time for scientific advancement in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And it was underpinned by something very sad, which was this antagonistic dynamic between the USSR and the USA. And I'm saying we should take the good of that period, of this space exploration, the scientific discoveries, this advancing, but don't underpin it with antagonistic dynamics between nation states, and instead foster a sense of cooperation and, like you say, responsibility. Responsibility is very important.
Okay, so tell us about some of your work. I know you are in Iceland, right? Right now, you're in charge of that program there.
Yes, so I'm in Iceland at the moment, and I'm working on a book about space law and intellectual property, actually, because of the technological innovation, which is very interesting. I come from a family of engineers, so I'm very interested in the engineering and intellectual property side of space exploration. But it's also a very exciting time to be in Iceland because different national space organizations have started looking at Iceland as the terrain on Earth that's closest to Mars, because of volcanic activity here, the rocks. Iceland, as you may know, it's a very unique geological landscape. Most people know Iceland as the land of fire and ice, so the volcanic activity and this kind of thing. And there are various parts of the terrain here that make it the place on Earth that's closest to Mars. So people, different national space organizations are looking into using it as a place to practice their Mars rovers or other exploratory equipment. So I've been kind of involved in that. But I'm particularly interested in this idea that space is for all of us. I do a lot of work on climate law. I'm also writing a book on polar law and the environment. And I care a lot about climate, and as a scientist, how documented that is and how important it is. And I see space exploration as an extension of caring for the planet. So I don't want space to become this sort of libertarian dream for the 0.1% can go and stay in some luxury hotel colony in space, and the rest of us suffer here on Earth. Space exploration should be for the many. It should be to use the resources, use the tools. So the mining there that would then take pressure off the Earth to stop climate change and global warming, but also have it part of a kind of broader sustainability approach. That's what I think is really important about a new era of space exploration. It should be bound up with sustainability.
Okay, and so tell us also about there's you've mentioned there's a lot of fascination about private exploration, and there's Elon Musk is doing, then Amazon, they are also Virgin
is getting very well, yes.
Yeah, Virgin is doing, and there was actually I don't know if you were following, Virgin had the first pilot, the FAA here issued the first space pilot certificate to one, and that was my dream one time, that to ever have space pilot. But
you never know. Could be.
Could be.
You've done many very innovative things. Maybe that's the next one. I always joke to my father, I'll be the first human rights lawyer in space. Maybe you could be the first, the clinic. But no, you're right. It's very interesting. there are a lot of different issues in that. So for instance, as you mentioned, space tourism. I mean, I'm not opposed to space tourism in the same way as I'm not opposed to tourism. It's okay that people want to go and see the wonders of the universe. But I think that it should be ethical and sustainable, right? And we know those debates already. Like there's a difference between sort of sustainable tourism that leaves a place as you found it, and a kind of exploitative or damaging initiative. So I think that space tourism, is not fundamentally wrong, but it should be responsible and sustainable. With the other private company, to be honest, I have great respect for these thinkers, as I have great respect for engineers and entrepreneurs, but and without them, we wouldn't have made so many of the advances in space. But I do have some concerns about the very libertarian ideas of people like Jeff Bezos, who seem to, some of his philosophy seems to be a bit like, oh, now we don't need to worry about the Earth because we'll just go find another one and kind of mess that up like we messed up here. And I don't want that to be the philosophy of space exploration or colonization. I'm also thinking a lot. My first degree was in history, and I did a lot of research on the very tragic and damaging impact that European colonialism had in the rest of the world. And I'm very kind of conscious of that. And when you have companies and nation states competing for one another, as you had with early European colonialism, you had companies like the East India Company, and then you also had nation states vying for one another, and in a very exploitative dynamic, a very brutalizing dynamic. I don't want this new era of space exploration to be exploitative. I want it instead to be something that helps humankind as a whole. I think that's very important.
No, I think your book and your thoughts are really very, very futuristic, and that's gonna really, and it is very responsible too, and we really don't need to, have a difference to imagine even what would take or what would happen, because look at, if you just change, instead of space, if you put it as ocean, or if you put it as land, or like you said, they ruined Earth, and why you're gonna go out and ruin Mars, and then ruin in between space too. So that is so true, that the thinking, it is same actually, pretty much, right? So if the rules are same, if you're gonna mess up ocean, if you're gonna mess up Earth, you can mess up pretty much anything, right? I think your thoughts are really futuristic. I really admire you, that at least somebody's saying something. Everybody gets carried away with these, oh, look at how cool it is. That's true, it's cool, but what about responsibility?
Right, exactly. And the two can go together as well, right? I mean, space, who isn't fascinated? Who didn't want to be an astronaut when they were a child? Of course, it's the wonders of the universe. And, as a scientist, scientists are driven by their fascination for the wonder of the universe. And that's a very beautiful thing. And that's very human, to be kind of fascinated by our world. I think about this a lot in Iceland. When in the winter, I see the aurora borealis, I see the northern lights. And every time I see them, I'm astonished, to think the universe makes this. It's wonderful. So it's wonderful that humans want to go out and explore further and develop our knowledge, but just to make sure that we are not doing it in a way that's damaging, but in a way that's instead nourishing, like nourishing the earth, dealing with the problem of climate change. It's not a solution to climate change that we just will mess up the earth and go find somewhere else. We need to tend to the earth and heal the earth, but also explore further in a way that's for the good of everyone and for the good of what's around us as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that is so futuristic, and it's a really future vision. I really admire you for that. So when is your book coming out?
It should be out 2021. It's been delayed a little because of COVID, but that's not, of course, the greatest tragedy of this time. But yes, I'll let you know when it's out. I would love for you to, if you have time to read it. I would be very honored. You do such great work, so I would be really honored.
No, come to our channel. We'll be happy to launch it for you. Also, tell us a little bit about in Iceland. What do you see with space exploration? Is it helping some of the pollution? That there was some concern, I think, that they were going to use some of the technology actually to monitor these, damage from, earlier these gases. They were monitoring that, so.
Oh, you mean through satellite monitor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not sort of an expert on that, but I do think that, yeah, the more technological advances we have in that way are like for the good. Like if we're coming from a place of like, we're doing this because we're concerned about climate change, we're concerned about sustainability, these technological advances are really great because they give us additional tools. But as you say, like there is the problem of having these millions of satellites in the sky with the space junk. In Iceland, because the climate is very unique here, we've had that most people in the world remember Iceland from the volcano that caused all the aviation disruption in 2009. Like there are sort of specific, unique challenges here where they're very interested in using these tools in order to better monitor our Earth as well. So for meteorological reasons as well, and also for developing our understanding. So my sorry to make this personal. My older sister is a paleoclimatologist, and I know that she says that the more these kinds of satellite equipment would provide greater insight into mapping the long waves of climate change over very, very long periods. So that all feeds into our better understanding of Earth as well. Like space exploration also feeds into our better understanding of the Earth and of climate change. So these things are all sort of, working in tandem.
So
the long explanation.
So tell me also about moon exploration. Do you think there was some concern that, like China was doing south, dark side of the moon more?
Right.
And so how is the territory about moon, and is it distributed, or is it like anybody's game?
It's interesting. It is there is this sort of Wild West, even though there is the Outer Space Treaty and there are various UN organizations and coordinations involved in it. In terms of what's actually going on, like who would you monitor it? What court would you bring it to? Would you litigate a nation state claiming it? And we know like how nation states can act in and I'm not meaning to single out China here, although as you've said, there are these conversations. But if you think about, for instance, like the scramble for Africa, right, in the late 19th century, that the nation states just kind of making, or what I'm studying in the Arctic at the moment as well, so on Earth, but this kind of seedy attempts by different countries to kind of stake a claim or take land from somebody else so they can use the resources. There are those concerns, and this is why I think we should have much more robust laws and robust regulation of space, because otherwise, right, it would just become might is right and become a kind of Wild West, which is not what we want, because it should be a very positive, progressive thing that helps everybody, right? Not just turned into some like geopolitical power game.
So like, tell us a little bit about the space treaty. They have it. Is it like more? We have the space station, so like different nations can use each other resources and just kind of stay put, or is it like? So what is? I am not well versed with it. So tell me.
Yeah, no problem. So so there's the 1998 treaty that coordinates how the ISS is used. But actually prior to that, there is the Outer Space Treaty, the so-called Outer Space Treaty, which is, we call it like the Constitution for Space. Actually, one of the arguments I make in my book, we need like a real kind of constitution for space, or perhaps more akin to like the UN Charter. And this governs various things to do with like how you report back findings. So if you've discovered something, you can't keep it to yourself.
Right.
Although the way that nation states operate is often they want to kind of peacock, like we found this, so they tend to broadcast it a lot. But you have to declare findings of anything that's been discovered. So if somebody discovered like water on a planet, you couldn't kind of keep that to yourself. You have to kind of disclose that so that that's for the good of everybody. But in some ways, it's still very unclear in a lot of the Outer Space Treaty. Like when you get down to the real kind of minutiae of things like how would resources be distributed, or who can kind of claim what. And so one of the arguments I'm making is like the law itself is not strong enough. Like we do, not because I'm trying to police everyone. I think space exploration is wonderful, but we need to come up with like the rules of the game now, because it's really the crunch time of the next few years of this new era of space exploration, in order to ensure that the new era of space exploration is equitable.
So where I see now with US, we have a space force, and so I think the next I was reading is the next probably game gonna be more about weapons and so forth. They're gonna all the nations gonna have these suborbital weapons of and then they or even higher space weapons. So pretty much they're gonna use that for kind of war games.
Yeah, military power plays.
Military power game. So do you see that? Is there any things to limit, because it's can probably damage all of us?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that there will be initiatives to kind of limit that as soon as possible, because I think the worst thing we could do with space is take the worst parts of our nature and just extrapolate it larger, so then we'll just fight wars up there. And I also don't, there are some people who try to argue that from a humanitarian perspective, like, okay, well, it will become like sort of gladiator, we'll fight the wars up there and then it won't harm people on Earth. But I think that this kind of shift of like just extrapolating out this sort of militarized way of engaging with one another into the realm of outer space is very sad and problematic, and would also be very damaging to scientific research. So whatever your political perspective is, and I'm not being against one nation here or pro another nation, but whatever your policy, if you are like, people who value science and the exploration of the truth, I think that it would also hamper and hinder those kind of very good-hearted explorations to kind of discover space, because it will then get turned into this kind of arena for I mean, I've seen this already in my work on the Arctic. This is not space, but there's a similar kind of dynamic when you have, scientific initiatives and scientific endeavors to do work in the Arctic space or in the polar regions, being hampered by sort of militaristic power plays between different nation states. And it's a great kind of tragedy for all humankind, because then we're losing that kind of knowledge and that discovery.
Mm-hmm. So tell us, I assume you have been to a lot of these places. Tell us what are the effects you have seen firsthand from pollution, and are these glaciers melting away, and is it really damaging?
Yeah, that's actually one of the kind of most poignant and touching experiences I've had since I've been in Iceland, was when there was the funeral for the glacier, which may sound kind of trite, but it was actually very sad. I didn't grow up here, but now lots of my very close friends are Icelandic, and it was this idea that this glacier had been here for, like, it's mentioned in the sagas, from the like ancient period. It's been beyond human history, and then we're the ones witnessing its death. And you do notice that, and especially when you talk to older people here, and especially with Iceland, they have the very rich literary tradition of the sagas. So you have descriptions of what things looked like 500, 1,000 years ago. You do definitely really feel the impact of climate change very directly. And with the research I'm doing in the polar region, I mean, Iceland isn't polar, but it's, past Akureyri, which is the northern city to here, so much further into the polar region. And the like total reconfiguration of the natural world is just so evident. And that's really worrying. And what's really worrying then is when actors with bad intentions then take advantage of that, right? It opens up new routes for the ships to go through to then do further drilling. And so the climate change creates new kind of opportunities for people who just want to exploit the environment. And is very, very sad to watch that happen. I've been like documenting that quite a lot in my book on polar law.
Oh, okay. And I think that's really important to recognize the effects we have so far and who's gonna. Now, tell us which is the agency is it UNO or anything else who is monitoring some of these effects or regulations or where you as a person, a responsible citizen of Earth can say, no, this is, we have some form or some kind of organization to monitor. Who is the organization who's taking lead here?
Monitoring climate change?
No, the space.
Okay, right. Okay, I understand. Yeah, sorry. So it's mainly the treaty that's bound to the Outer Space Treaty, the committee that's linked to that. There are some nations that have become very pivotal in the whole arena as a whole. They kind of position themselves kind of gatekeepers. So, for instance, Luxembourg actually is very, very strongly involved in kind of coordination between different space organizations where it's one of the places where a lot of the academic work on space exploration is done. So they then take it to like the UN. It's kind of, they played Luxembourg has really kind of carved out its kind of position as a kind of gatekeeper of it in the same way as like Geneva is the gatekeeper of the Geneva Conventions under like international humanitarian law. Luxembourg has a very specific role in kind of being like the keeper of a lot of space issues and ethics to do with space issues. So they're kind of an important organization. Also, not every nation has a space agency, which is one of the kind of imbalances as well. And so like large countries that do then dominate the whole conversation, which is it's not really fair. Like they're like, if you come from a country that doesn't have a space agency because it's not as kind of, it doesn't have the money put aside for its own national space program, you as a citizen should be allowed to still participate and share in the conversations about what space should be, because it should be for all people on Earth. It shouldn't be solely for people who come from countries that have national space agencies.
Okay, that makes sense. So thank you for that great discussion. I'm sure.
I hope I made sense.
Yes, let's summarize. Any final nuggets or thoughts you would like to give it to our audience?
That's very kind of you. I worry I've probably spoken too much, so I'll keep it simple. I think space exploration is a wonderful and beautiful and exciting thing, but it should be for everyone, and it should be fair, and it should be just. That's my perspective.
So yes, and so true, that space for all,
exactly
for all generations and to come, and responsibility actually doesn't end if you just find another space to ruin. Right, so you're absolutely right. Responsibility remains the same. Pollution rules, everything remains same. So with those thoughts in mind, we really thank you for a great discussion. Come back again when your book is ready.
I would really like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. Take care.
Bye.